The killing of African Americans like George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks by police officers is a systemic problem in the U.S. which requires profound changes that go way beyond prosecutions and police reforms, according to the UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions.
Agnes Callamard, a human rights and press freedom expert who led the UN inquiry into the 2018 murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, is urging U.S. authorities to listen to the demands of nationwide protesters who have taken to the streets since Floyd was killed in Minneapolis on 25 May by a white police officer kneeling on his neck.
This was an arbitrary killing in which the state and police officers must be held accountable, said Callamard in a telephone interview. Of course we need to go after each case because through accountability we can start shifting the policy. But the historic George Floyd protest movement has underlined that political, civil, social and economic rights are intertwined, not separate, and that these structural and systemic conditions reflect a person's vulnerability.
Last year, American police officers killed 1,098 people, according to the Mapping Police Violence Project.
Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed than whites by police in the U.S., despite being 1.3 times less likely to be armed. In addition, only 1% of police killings between 2013 and 2019 resulted in officers being charged with a crime.
Callamard said, as an international human rights expert, this is such a learning moment because it lays bare the necessity of moving beyond narrow definitions and technicalities of police reform, as they won't be sufficient for meaningful systemic change.
In response, the UN Human Rights Council, which the U.S. left 2 years ago, will today hold an urgent debate on racism, police brutality and the violent crackdown on peaceful protests. After watching the mobile phone video footage of Floyd's death, Callamard's initial reaction was not again. What stood out was how long the officer knelt on his neck and his indifference, but that was all that stood out. I am horrified because we are watching people dying in public at the hands of those who are supposed to protect us, she said. Floyd's death has triggered worldwide condemnation and protests against police brutality and racism, but this has failed to prevent more killings. Last Friday, Rayshard Brooks, a 27-year-old black man, was fatally shot twice in the back by an officer in Atlanta, after he appeared to grab a police taser and run away, having been woken while sleeping in his car in a Wendy's car park. Every aspect of this case makes my stomach turn, said Callamard, who said she had identified multiple possible violations after watching the video footage repeatedly. Mr. Brooks was asleep, he had not committed a crime per se, why did they need to arrest him? He was running away and the taser could not be described as posing a threat. Why did the officer not run after him, or pick him up later, why did he get his gun out? Nothing about this makes any sense from a policing standpoint. Brooks's death has been declared a homicide by the medical examiner, but the police officer involved has yet to be arrested. It's another arbitrary killing for which the state and police officer is responsible, which reveals yet again the systemic nature of the problem, said Callamard. Callamard has requested authorization to conduct a fact-finding mission to the U.S., which she hopes will take place in early 2021, that would focus on unpacking the root causes and systematic forces in the death penalty and police killings. If authorized, it would be the first visit since 2008 and the UN team will seek testimonies from the families of victims like Floyd, Brooks and Breonna Taylor, and also visit towns and cities where meaningful reforms have been attempted. Callamard identifies 2 structural issues as key to understanding the shocking situation in the U.S. The reasonable force test applied by U.S. police to justify the use of force, including lethal force, which is much lower than the international threshold of necessary and proportionate use of force, and qualified impunity, which protects police officers from lawsuits. The U.S. should establish an independent prosecution body in cases of police violence. This wouldn't be a panacea, but it would be an important step, she said. But demands for the police to be defunded have grown in recent weeks, which Callamard argues must be taken seriously. I'm fearful that the political establishment in the U.S. will fail to capture the radical demands of the protesters which deserve to be considered and reflected upon, so we do have meaningful changes, she said.